Ukraine is reinforcing the 35-kilometer sector between Pokrovsk and Huliaipole at the junction of Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia Oblasts in eastern Ukraine. Unit Observer was among the first to draw attention to the troops' reshuffling. The shift from urban to open terrain north of Pokrovsk has changed the defensive calculus. Drones work better in fields than ruins, freeing infantry-heavy assault units to reinforce the vulnerable 35-kilometer sector, where Russian tank and motor rifle divisions have been exploiting gaps. As the 92nd Assault Brigade arrived around Pokrovsk on or just before Monday, one of its first actions was to strike, with first-person view drones, a pair of Russian troopers riding toward Ukrainian lines on horseback. The redeployment of Ukrainian forces comes at a critical time. The Russian center group of forces has consolidated in the ruins of Pokrovsk and Mirnorad in Donetsk Oblast, and now controls most of both towns. From these new positions, they're striking out and beginning the long, hard march toward the twin cities of Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, 50 kilometers to the north. To reach those cities, the Russians will have to advance across kilometer after kilometer of open terrain. They can't always repeat the urban assault tactics, small infantry groups leapfrogging through town ruins that helped them win in Pokrovsk and Mirnorad. Infantry are best not only for urban attacks, they're also best for urban defense. But many Ukrainian brigades are desperately short of infantry. What they have in abundance are drones. And drones work best over open terrain, where the enemy has nowhere to hide. So the Ukrainian brigades north of Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad are pivoting back to a drone-first defense, bolstered by careful mining and heavy artillery fire. On Monday, the Ukrainian 4th National Guard Brigade and adjacent units repelled a powerful Russian mechanized assault involving 4 armor columns, with potentially dozens of vehicles. The 4th National Guard Brigade mined the likeliest approach vectors, and then sent in FPV drones and fired a lot of artillery and rockets. Targets are tracked, fixed, and methodically dismantled, the brigade reported. Note the absence of major infantry action in the Ukrainian defense. That could become more common as Ukrainian forces defend the open terrain between Pokrovsk and Kramatorsk. This ongoing shift apparently reassured Ukrainian commanders that they could spare some or all of several brigades and regiments from the Pokrovsk-Myrnohrad sector and send them south. Even as all eyes were on Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad in recent months, the Russians were making their most dramatic gains in the direction of Pokrovsk and Huliaipole. The powerful Russian Dnipro group of forces, anchored by the 91st Tank Division and the 127th Motor Rifle Division, pushed weary, outnumbered Ukrainian mechanized and territorial troops back tens of kilometers to the western banks of the Vovcha and Haichur rivers. Those rivers now trace the main line of contact between Pokrovsk and Huliaipole. They're formidable barriers, but not uncrossable for Russian engineers and their pontoon bridges. To advance as far as they have in recent months, the Russians in Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia have exploited gaps in Ukrainian defenses, resulting from a paucity of forces. Newly arriving assault troops could fill those gaps. They'll fight with mines, drones, and artillery, of course. But as the Russians push closer to Pokrovsk and make further plays for Huliaipole's outlying neighborhoods, the Ukrainian reinforcements may have to deploy their precious infantry too. The Russians are redoubling their efforts to close the Mirnohrad pocket. Ukrainian forces are fighting hard to keep open a narrow escape corridor for troops still defending the former mining town with a pre-war population of 46,000. With almost all of neighboring Pokrovsk under Russian control following a bloody year-long siege, Mirnorad is now one of the main focal points of fighting in eastern Ukraine. The town's fall would remove one of the last major urban obstacles between Russian forces and the twin cities of Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, the largest Ukrainian-held cities in Donetsk Oblast, with a combined pre-war population of 400,000. Around 150,000 Russians from the center group of forces are relentlessly attacking the approximately 30,000 Ukrainian troops, with the 1st Azov Corps and 7th Rapid Response Corps. The Russians are determined to capture or surround Myrnohrad as soon as possible, in order to clear one of the last large urban strongpoints on the road to Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, 40 kilometers to the north. Russian infantry is abundant in and around Myrnohrad, but it wasn't infantry who led the most recent push to encircle the town from the north and cut across the barely 1 kilometer Ukrainian-controlled corridor leading out toward the main defensive line. The Russian 40th Naval Infantry Brigade attacked with up-armored turtle tanks and other vehicles on Tuesday, clearly hoping a low-clinging fog would obscure the mechanized assault from overhead surveillance and attack. Winter weather has been aiding Russian advances across the front. Morning fog and frozen ground facilitate movement, while Ukrainian reconnaissance drones struggle to monitor enemy movements. It didn't work. The Russians were still kilometers from the wide no-man's land when disaster struck. The equipment was moving across the field, the 7th Rapid Reaction Corps reported. One of the tanks got stuck in an anti-tank ditch, after which the column was quickly taken under fire control. Drones from the 7th Rapid Reaction Corps barreled down. The Ukrainian 68th Jaeger Brigade's artillery joined in. The Ukrainians knocked out 3 tanks and 8 other armored vehicles around the village of Rzin, a significant blow to Russian mechanized capability in the sector. How the Ukrainians saw through the fog is unclear. The thick haze typical of Ukrainian winters can blind and ground many drones, but Ukrainian forces have been scrambling to develop new tactics and technology to counter the problem. Whichever method the Ukrainians used, it worked for now. Mirnohrad remains contested, despite the Russians' overwhelming manpower advantage and the foggy weather that typically blunts the Ukrainians' robotic edge.
Where's Bill?
Орудие!